Welcome back to Scherable After Dark. It is Thursday, October 1st, an hour till midnight. And just want to do a check-in on where the presidential race stands. We're just short of it being a month out, 33 days, be 32 days in about an hour. We are 2 days after the first debate. And the debates where Trump's team thought they'd have their game changer, that Biden would show he was not up to the job, not ready for prime time, and that would be where you get a big momentum shift. And after immediately after the debate, you saw many people, particularly Democrats, say that the debate was off the rails. Trump bullied over everybody, wouldn't let Biden get a word in edgewise, unfair, terrible for democracy. But what's happened in the 2 days since, it's all been fallout over Trump's refusal to fully condemn the Proud Boys. And that moment would not have happened in a rigidly structured, tightly moderated debate. That happened because there was some elasticity in people's ability to talk. The moderator and Trump were getting into it. Biden was jumping in. The moderator, Chris Wallace, was pushing Trump to more explicitly denounce specific white supremacist groups. Biden threw in Proud Boys, and that's what Trump responded to. When you had when the kind of debates we're having around the turn of the century, 2 minutes, 90 seconds, those were scripted affairs. Talking point. You don't get to really see who the candidates are. So Trump was nasty and obnoxious and full of lies, but you saw who he was. And stuff pops out of your mouth when you're being yourself. And every day there isn't a momentum change. Every day there isn't any forward movement on the part of the Trump campaign is a lost day. And he is in the Real Clear Politics average. I just last checked, there's a little above 7 points nationally. Biden lead, 538, 8-point lead. There has never been an incumbent comeback. I've said this since June, that no elected incumbent has ever come back from 7 points behind from the summer. You have the example of Truman in an era when there's a lot less polling and it was a lot more crude, where he did have a comeback. Truman was behind 6 points at the end of September in the Gallup poll. And so now I can say no incumbent, I don't have to have the elected qualifier. No incumbent in the era of polling has come back from 7 points down 1 month out. Just never happened. Bush was about 2.5 points behind. Obama was about 1.5 points behind. Bush was 2.5 points behind in the summer in 2004 against Kerry, and Obama was 1.5 points behind in mid-October after he had a bad first debate. Now, the people are not quick to embrace these historical examples because we are scarred from the experience of 2016. Around this time, a little bit after, is when Hillary had one of her peaks. I don't think quite her highest peak, but she was about 7 points up in mid-October in the aftermath of the Access Hollywood tapes. It had gotten quite narrow in mid-September after the basket of deplorables comment and Hillary's fainting episode at 9/11. Then Access Hollywood widened that out again, and the debates, I think, were part of that too. And then it narrows again after the Comey letter. So some folks point to the Comey letter as the thing. If that didn't happen, Hillary would have won. And that may be. We can't really do the counterfactual. But I think to just pin it on that ignores that there was just a lot more volatility in the race than what you're seeing today. I'm going to try to hold this up. I don't know how well it's going to come through, showing you stuff on my phone. But, this is the Hillary Trump trajectory in real clear politics. Hillary's up most of the time, almost all the time, but there are those dips, and she never really gets all that close to 50. She was a little close to 50 in around mid-October. She touched 49 briefly. Sorry about that glare, but she was generally more in the mid 40s, and she was sagging at these various points. And at the time, I wasn't perceptive enough to notice this at the time. At the time, I'd say, well, those dips are temporary. Look at the general thrust of things. She's in pretty good shape. And now you look at it and you say, look, she wasn't getting to 50. She was kind of getting sagged. There was this gravitational pull weighing her down, and that was reflective of a hesitancy. And I'm not one to just pin that on Hillary as a person. I think there was some backlash related to Obama as well, particularly amongst white working class, that you can't separate out from the equation. But as you've probably seen, the Biden-Trump graph is so much more stable. That glare is terrible. There we go. Biden has never gone before 4, never been less than 4. He's been around 6, 7, 8 for a good while now. And it's not just the national number. So one of the arguments people might say, beyond the volatility question is, well, the polls are just wrong. What if there's an industry-wide category error and you're missing, shy Trump votes, secret Trump votes, just a surge that's going to come out of unlikely voters in the Rust Belt? You can't discount everything. I mean, weird things happen, but we have a lot of data. It's not just national. We have a lot of Pennsylvania polling. We have a lot of Michigan polling. We have a lot of Wisconsin polling. We have polling in states that were not expected to be competitive, like Iowa, like Georgia, like South Carolina, where Biden was down 1 in the most recent Quinnipiac poll. Alaska is closer than people expected it was going to be. Texas is closer than people expected it was going to be. And the Senate races are more. It's not even just Trump. The fact that Iowa and Kansas and South Carolina and at least one of the 2 Georgia races and Alaska, that these are all at least competitive. I mean, all this data points in the same direction. And it would be really, really weird for it to all be, not just a little bit wrong, but like really, really wrong. And so that's why I take the numbers at face value. There is a Democratic wind that is blowing. Again, I can't know if every individual poll is exactly on the nose. And we're in a period in October where there's often narrowing, and narrowing tends to be, you get a bunch of undecideds of people who are really leaning one way and just don't quite pull the trigger when they talk to a pollster. Well, I'm seeing these focus groups now of undecideds. And when you hear them talk, you can tell they're not really undecided. Maybe there's some who decide between Biden or staying home, or some that are generally for Trump but don't like this or that and just kind of want to wait and be pushed over by one slightly bothersome thing that Biden said. These are not folks who are truly 50-50 on the fence. So if your undecided pool was really a bunch of soft Trump voters, then that you would get a narrowing, you would get a tightening as you got closer to Election Day, and that's not really unusual. It's also possible for the bottom to drop out. It's also possible that Biden staying at 6, 7, or 8, and either some folks tip over. I mean, to hear Scott Adams today, to hear Scott Adams say, "I can't believe Trump couldn't denounce a white supremacist group. I'm shocked and stunned. I had no idea he was like that. He's lost my vote." You can talk about how ridiculous that sounds, but hey, if there's voters out there like that, that might mean something. There might be votes that stay home or actually tip over because for whatever weird reason, that was the breaking point for them. I also think you might just get people more demoralization. You assume, that demoralization can go either way. You assume someone's going to win, and so the person who's ahead, you say, that person has it. I don't like that person that much anyway, but he or she's going to win, so I'm going to stay home. But it can work on the losing end, that you think Trump's a goner, and you're resigned to that fact, and so you stay home. That kind of dynamic might be mitigated by the fact of widespread mail voting. It's just easier to vote. So it's not a big hassle to get to the polls. You're just filling out something at home, and maybe that mitigates that kind of late movement. But again, it is possible for certain jerky things to occur in the tail end of an election, but very, very, very unusual for just to flip altogether. If you have the country for the past year indicating, I'm really done with this, it's time to stop the insanity and get back to normal, that's probably what's going to carry the day. That's not reason for anybody to stay home. That's not a reason for complacency. That's not a reason to make fewer phone calls or give less money or don't bother knocking on doors. It's a reason to understand where the race sits and where resources should be deployed. If there is a big blue wave coming, you want to extend it. You want to spread the map. Look, I was a guy for a long time that said, don't waste your money in South Carolina. There's no evidence of South Carolina voting Democrat statewide in the past 20 years. No governor's race, no state attorney general. In Iowa, Iowa was a place a lot of folks were writing off. And I said, look, Democrats won the House popular vote in 2018. They came up short in the governor's race, but the fact that they got the most votes in the House races said to me, something's happening there. And I think that's bearing out. I underplayed the fact that Democrats won one race in South Carolina. That struck me as a bit of an anomaly, maybe a harbinger of things to come way down the line. But now it looks like, and not to say that Biden actually can win there, or that Jimmy Harrison's going to win there, but we've had a number of polls that show a tied South Carolina Senate race, two of which have Jimmy Harrison hitting 48. So, I'm more dubious of a tie race when it's 40-41. But if you're getting close to 50, my ears are going to perk up. And so now I might say, what? He's got a lot of money, so he doesn't really need it right now. But it seems more plausible to me that you want to give him an extra boost because maybe, just maybe, that's going to extend. Maybe Biden can get over the margin there. And even if he doesn't, even if Biden ends up losing by 2, I don't think that's irrelevant, because the bigger the win, the broader the blue wave, the wider the electoral college margin, the more states that Democrats can flip in the Senate or get close, is a stronger indication to Republicans that remaining a Trumpist party is a big mistake. That this won't be a one-off situation. What happened with Obama in 2008, that was a pretty big win. It was a 7-point win, if I'm remembering correctly. Flipped some surprise states, winning Indiana and North Carolina, weren't quite expected. But Republicans responded to that by largely digging in their heels and saying, let's obstruct Obama as much as we possibly can. Let's try to make this as short a presidency as possible and make this an aberration. They weren't convinced that this was an inevitable shifting of the center of gravity of the country, and they may still they may act the same way this time around. I'm not going to be a Republican mind reader, but I do think the bigger the win, the more of the chance that certain Republicans are going to say, I can't behave the same way that I did before. It's not going to work. I'm not going to keep my Senate seat. We're not going to get back to the presidency. If you're making, if Democrats are winning in Georgia and North Carolina and making it close in South Carolina, one of the deepest South states, one of the most conservative states in the union, if that's becoming within 5 points, that's a gut punch to Republicans. That means that not just a state is changing, the South is changing. A bulwark of the Republican base is changing. And so that's got to turn some heads. I can't predict how long it's going to take them to become rational. It might not be right away. But the more you can implant those thoughts in their head, the more of a chance someone's going to move and make it easier to actually govern. So that's why I would be thinking about. I mean, if I'm Biden, I've not been one to be backseat driver to the Biden campaign. I have not, jumped up and frantically waved my hands every time they do something a little non-traditional or not especially aggressive. Biden tends to work at a deliberate pace. He doesn't react in panic at every news cycle, at every consultant's whim. And I think that has generally worked for him to be slow and steady. And I'm not particularly bent out of shape that his travel schedule is very light. If you've noticed on Twitter, I've been keeping track of the states that he's traveled and how many states he hasn't been to at all. And that number is considerable. I think there is a strong argument that, visiting states a lot is not actually all that important in the big scheme of things. Now, he has the excuse of the pandemic, of course, that makes this not the best of case studies, but he did have the Super Tuesday, a state where he visited almost no state, had almost no money, had very little ground game, very few field offices, and won it handily. And that, to me, the lesson of that was the most important thing is free media. Biden's free media from South Carolina primary to Super Tuesday was as perfect as a campaign could possibly desire. And that moved the most votes. And Donald Trump was wildly outspent by Hillary Clinton. Trump did not win with money. His team will tell you that it was their clever data mining and social media strategies that were underappreciated at the time. And again, it's hard to definitively say that's right or wrong, but they have a self-interest in promoting how good they were to the media, and they told themselves, I think, they were much better than they actually are, because the same tricks they're trying to pull today are not working. The most important thing is what's going on in the free media space. What's the general national conversation? And that has not been working in Trump's favor all year. And that's a heck of a mountain to climb. So it may be that once that's baked in the cake, the ground game stuff becomes less important. Now, that's not to say that people shouldn't do things. Ground game tends to be 1, 2, 3 points depending on what political science study that you're looking at. The question is, where is that line? Where are the places that it can tip, where a bit of an extra edge on the air, on the ground might make a difference? And that's a hard line to know with precision, but that's where I think the ground game can potentially matter most. So my point with talking about Biden's travel schedule is I don't think it matters all that much how active his travel is. But if I were Biden, the one thing I would do that he's not doing yet is having the strategically scheduled events in the reach states. His travel has been heavy Rust Belt. It's been a lot of, the state he's visited to most, memory serves, is Pennsylvania. I think it's 5/10 of Pennsylvania, and he's got a couple times in Wisconsin and Michigan, and he's got Florida coming up for a second time. It's the one non-Rust Belt state they will have gone to twice. The little Ohio, he had his first trip to Ohio yesterday as part of the train trip. Hasn't gone to Arizona, hasn't gone to Georgia, hasn't gone to Texas, hasn't gone to South Carolina, hasn't gone to Montana or Iowa, where Montana's not a state he's going to win, but there's a Senate race there. He may think that Texas is too much of an investment. 20 media markets. Sure, it's kind of close, but it'd be so expensive to play there seriously. Maybe the cost benefit just isn't there. But I think just showing up one day with MJ Hager by your side, she's got a name ID issue. That's going to boost her name ID and maybe make that into a close race. The amount of time and resources involved in just one visit is not that much. Yes, time is precious for a presidential candidate, and there's only 32 days left on the calendar. But if you're not traveling all that much, you can get one day in there just to send the signal. We're spreading the map. We're not trying to thread the needle here. We're trying to win big. We're trying to be the president of America. We're going to bring together red, purple, and blue. I suspect there will be some of this eventually. But if I was there, I'd be petitioning to do it sooner. Do that flex sooner. And I think Biden, some races you wouldn't want the president to come because the place is so red and the Senate candidate has a distinct profile that cuts against the National Democratic Party. So they might say, "Hey, guy, I don't need you coming here. Yeah, I'll do this on my own." But I don't think Biden's that guy. Biden can go to South Carolina. Biden can go to Montana. Biden can go to Texas. In most of those states, the numbers are close enough that it's not insane. And even in Montana, where maybe it's not, I don't think it's going to engender a negative backlash to the Senate candidate to have Biden come in and give the unifying, moderate message that he has been giving in a staged event. Can Trump do anything at this point to turn things around? It would be history. It would be historic to come back from this far down. But, history happens. Sometimes people break the rules. But I think something has to change. And I think it has to be a change. Sometimes people say, well, what war is he going to start? I don't think he wants one. He's never been that much of a warmonger. But it's also just irrational to me that adding more gas on the fire is what's going to help him here. He needs to bring us to some place of relative calm. His hope was that everything would be open now. The economy would be booming by now, and we would be dealing with the virus and feeling hopeful that the vaccine was around the corner. And instead, we're hearing more layoffs, more coronavirus spikes, and now infecting his own inner circle and possibly himself for all we know. Well, he's gotten tested tonight, and we'll find out soon enough. So none of that's working for him. This would be, in my opinion, prime time to cave into Pelosi on stimulus and get a bunch of stimulus checks in the mail before Election Day. And they seem to have some inclination to do that. They've apparently upped their offer, but they seem inclined to not up it enough to make Pelosi happy, and would rather say, "Hey, we're making an offer, and she won't meet us halfway." I would, if you're being rational, I would think you would act in a more desperate fashion and go get pretty darn close to where Pelosi is and make that deal happen. I would not be surprised if there's a Saudi Arabian Israeli peace deal. I would not be surprised if there was a North Korean peace deal to try to bail Trump out right now. Those are the things that, not that I think a foreign policy thing like that would necessarily be the game changer when people are so concerned about the economy and the virus. But that's the kind of stuff I think Trump might do outside of sowing mistrust in the entire electoral system and preparing us for a nasty post-election period. Those are the things I would think Trump might try to do, or quite frankly, should try to do outside of destroying democracy, to try to turn this around for him. But chances are there's very little he really can do if people's minds are just flat made up that they don't like what the incumbent has been doing for 3+ years. That's why it's very hard for incumbents to have big comebacks. People are quite aware of your record, especially a guy like Trump who's in your TV box on your computer screen nonstop. So I'll leave you with just the hopeful message that I think you should take the numbers at face value. I think you should use those numbers to run up the score, deploy your resources in an aggressive fashion. No one should sit on their hands, and I think with a largely mail-in election, you're going to have big turnout. There's going to be a sense of a real, if not a mandate for a particular agenda, because Biden has been running pretty lightly on policy specifics, a pretty clear mandate against the Trump agenda. And the bigger that message is, the more loudly that message is sent, there is, I think, hope that the polarizing dynamic we're in could change. I mean, this is also part of the debate that we are having. Can the Republican Party change? Will they ever change? Is negative polarization, negative partisanship something that is impossible to dislodge? And maybe it is. I'm not making predictions there, but there are cycles of polarization in American history, and if we're going to break that cycle today, a big resounding win is a likely way for it to get broken. Well, thanks again for checking out an edition of Scherable. Please subscribe. Subscribing helps make this a monetizable project. And I hope to check back in with you real soon. Take care.